Well, Congress is back, which means the smell of pork should soon be filling the air here in Washington. Or maybe not. Republican Senator John Thune went on the record about earmarks. Senator, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Greta.
Senator, I want to make sure I get it straight on your view of earmarks and whether we should have them or not have them.
I think the American people have spoken on that. They made it abundantly clear that they want action on earmarks. And we had a number of votes on this in the last Congress. Republicans put forward amendments on the Senate floor to put a moratorium on earmarks, take a time out to reform the process by which we spend the people's money. Those were always defeated, but we adopted today by a voice vote at our Republican Conference Rules meeting a resolution basically putting Republicans on record in favor of a 2-year moratorium on earmarks, and also asking the Democrats, urging the Democrats to do the same thing and follow our lead.
All right, now, as a practical matter, earmarks are just a fraction of what our government spends, is that correct?
Well,
less than 1%, way less than 1%?
It is in terms of overall spending. But I think what the problem with earmarks is that people across the country equate earmarks with corruption. And there's been too much, there's been a proliferation of earmarks, there have been too many abuses of earmarks over the years, and I think people associate it with special interest favors that have become too common in Washington. And this is a way of making a very clear statement to the American people that we have heard what they've said in this election and we intend to change.
I think that a lot of the public thinking about earmarks is that it's spent that it's billions of dollars spent on, why frogs like to leap or something like that. And I think people lose sight of the fact that a lot of money is spent for shock trauma units, where a senator will, in a district where it's very important to upgrade it, to have the high technology for hospitals to take care of people, or whatever. I mean, they're good earmarks.
Well, and I always maintain not all earmarks are created equal. But the problem we run into in the last few years is the number of earmarks has ballooned. In fact, it's exploded. And the way in which they are passed, I think, makes everybody raise questions about the process that we use to pass a lot of these things. There would be earmarks that we dropped in at the 11th hour that didn't pass the House, didn't pass the Senate. You'd have a group of people around a conference committee table that were deciding to put earmarks into bills, and there was a lot of stuff that became very abusive. So it's true that there are some very worthwhile things that have been funded that way, and Congress, under the Constitution, has the power of the purse, and so there is a certain constitutional argument in support of the Congress making spending decisions. But I think what has happened is we acknowledge that there's a problem here. We want a timeout. We want a moratorium. Let's take a look at this process and let's clean it up and figure out a way that makes sense for the American people so that they can have confidence and trust that the Congress is making good use of their tax dollars.
Why a moratorium? Why not just get rid of them? If everyone thinks, among many of you senators think it's a bad idea, why not just get rid of them?
Well, you could, and we will probably have some votes throughout the course of the next year where members of Congress and the Senate will have an opportunity to make votes about that issue. But I think for purposes of at least this exercise that we just went through here with the conference, what we decided was a 2-year moratorium on earmarks, and we will look at, is there a way in which we can reform this process that makes sense and that provides the level of confidence and trust the American people should have in their elected leaders, that they're making good, prudent, fiscally sound decisions with their tax dollars.
Anyone opposed to it at your meeting?
Well, it was done by voice vote. So
by voice, you don't know who opposed it?
There was a very resounding yes. Let's put it that way when we had the vote.
Now, last night we talked about discretionary spending. You want to roll it back to the amount of 2008,
right.
And that's about what percentage of our budget is discretionary spending?
Well, right now, if you count defense, it probably ends up being about 1/3. But if you count the non-national security discretionary spending, it's about 1/6. And so it's a small amount overall. But if you roll that back to 2008 levels, you save $450 billion over 10 years. And the other thing about it that's important is that in the last 2 years, non-defense discretionary spending has exploded by 21%. And if you add in the stimulus money, it was 84%. And that you can't justify that. Inflation over that same time period was 2%. So you've got the federal government growing basically at 10 times the rate of inflation. You cannot justify that to the American people. If we go back to 2008 levels, we can save a lot of money.
All right. Suppose it happens. Is it not true that the rules could be suspended or changed so that on one day everyone can vote for it and act like that's a great idea, but then in application that it sort of gets put under the carpet.
We have to make sure that if we get a vote on it, and we can get an affirmative vote on that, that continues to be
But that's a problem.
policy going forward. Well, every year you do a new appropriations process, you do a new budget, and so you can't bind a future Congress on some of these decisions. But if we have the political will to start making the hard decisions today, I think it'll make it easier for us to make those types of decisions in the future.
Can you see how Americans, though, might be at least some cynical about it when they hear different ideas? Because we've seen situations where these good ideas have passed, and suddenly, as we get, as time marches on, these good ideas get suspended, and all of a sudden we're back to the bad ideas.
That's true, and over time that's happened. But I think what we at least saw coming out of this election was a clear, resounding statement from the American people that they think that government has overreached, that government is growing too fast, that government has gotten too big, and they want that stopped. And they want to shrink the size of the federal government and get spending in Washington under control. And I hope that's a mood that will be with us for some time, because if we don't change our ways, we are on the road to a train wreck. I mean, we've got a few years to get this thing turned around, but we're running a $13 trillion debt. Our entire economy is about $14 trillion. We're on a pathway right now that will put us in the same category as countries in Europe, for example, that are really struggling. We saw Greece, we've got Ireland now, Portugal, Spain, lots of countries that are having serious financial problems, and we are just a heartbeat away from that.
Senator, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Greta.